Hi, welcome to SHOWstudio. It's the beginning of London Collections Men's, London Fashion Week Men's, London Men's Fashion Week, whatever it is. For those who don't know, Men's Fashion Week is a bit like Women's Fashion Week, but a lot worse. So we're here today to discuss Charles Jeffrey, and I'll let my panelists, a veritable platter of Charles Jeffrey enthusiasts, I think. So I'm here to be the voice of reason. And I'll let Willie start at the end.
Okay, hello, I'm Willie Walters, and until last August I was the Programme Director of Fashion at Central St Martin's. So I'm now a sort of interested person.
Great.
Oh, hello, I'm Princess Julia, and I do a variance of things, a bit of DJing, a bit of writing, and I'm also a great clubber. And I'm still at it after all these years.
Good. You're an icon. You can say you're an icon, Julia.
Oh, you can say that if you like.
Hi, I'm Richard Mortimer. I'm the editor of Pony Step magazine.
That was short and sweet, wasn't it?
You know.
Not like you. My name's Lyall Hakaraia, and I run a club called VFD in the East End. And Charles was a barman there, and he also started his label out of my venue as well.
Fantastic. I'm Mactaggart. I'm, of course, the editor-in-chief of Tatler magazine. So I wanted to begin there was an article in another magazine about Charles, and the title was Charles Jeffrey Reviving London's Subcultural Style Scene. And I think when we began talking about doing this panel, a lot of us at SHOWstudio were interested in talking about club culture. But that interview began with the sentence, Charles Jeffrey is not a fashion designer. Charles Jeffrey is a self-appointed creative director. And that reminded me of what Katie Grand said about Love magazine. She's a big fan of Charles. Love is not a fashion magazine, it's about style. So I wanted to begin by asking, is Charles Jeffrey a fashion designer or a stylist?
I would say he's probably a bit of both, because he obviously is very enthusiastic about the style that he creates and the people who are involved in making that style, which are usually his friends and the people around him. He's definitely making the fashions that these people are now wearing. And you know, he's very creative behind the scenes, making parties, art, film, and a whole array of things. I think just saying one or the other is not enough for where he's going and what he's hopefully going to be making in the future.
Yeah, I think you could add to that list and say he's an artist,
Yes,
actually.
absolutely.
As well. It's like a whole world, a whole sort of existence.
Well, he was definitely trained as a fashion designer.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, no, I wanted to bring you in on
He
this.
studied on the BA and the MA.
Yeah.
And on the BA, he actually studied on fashion design with marketing.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of interesting that during those years where he was studying that subject, fashion plus how to promote yourself, you know, his mind has been working first certainly in a kind of unconventional way, but at St Martin's obviously we try to get people to go devious routes.
Yeah.
So I think he definitely is a fashion designer, but you know, nowadays if you're a fashion designer, you've got to think of how to promote yourself. And if part of dressing up and going out and enjoying yourself is going clubbing, is it inventing your own clubs, I think that's always happened. Yeah. I mean, you were agreeing, we were saying back in the day, and my back in the day was back in the 1970s. But when I left St Martin's and I started my company Swanky Nose with 3 other girlfriends. Okay. We just used to party all the time, and there weren't that many great clubs to go to back then. Okay. So, but we'd go to Andrew Logan's World, anything that was an opportunity to go out, we would be wearing our clothes. So I think it just links.
Yeah, I mean, I think the best thing I ever did for my so-called fashion career was opening a nightclub. Because the thing that's really interesting about having a club and having that sort of social space is that everybody's off guard. There's so many times when you can go to like a fashion party and everybody's slightly on edge about who's going to say what and how they're going to behave. And then if you can go to somewhere like a nightclub, you can be completely free, you can be yourself, you can show sides of yourself that maybe you don't show in your business. That actually makes people understand you perhaps a little bit more deeply than they would from just what is produced, I suppose, just for fashion as well. And that's what it's about. You know, you want a community, you want to create that community and that idea of people being able to join with you and having fun.
I think what's really interesting though with Charles is that element of self-promotion. I think he's taken it to a level that we haven't seen for such a long time, and I think he's just been super clever and super driven about who he collaborates with, you know, where he sees himself going. And just downstairs looking at the credit sheet, actually I was saying to Lyall earlier, the fact that he's only, what, 4 seasons in, and you're looking at the credit sheet and already he's working with literally some of the best people in the industry. And that's sheer determination, you know, that's yeah.
But I think it's also that people share the same dream that he has and the same vision. So he's been really good at targeting those right people that aren't going to say no. They're absolutely going to say yes because they want to be part of that journey with him as well.
I want to touch on this idea of self-promotion and of building a community, and also what you mentioned, Willie, about the marketing side of fashion design at St. Martin's, and talk a bit about how, and also the very fast progress you mentioned of Charles and of indeed other designers who seem to kind of be very quickly rising through the ranks in London, especially coming out of CSM, is one thing that worries me is that this kind of stuff takes more of a precedence over the clothes, over the skills of crafting garments. Does anyone agree that we're losing a bit of the real craftsmanship behind clothes with this kind of marketing-driven approach?
No, I don't agree.
Well, it depends what you're talking about for marketing. You know, obviously there are huge companies where their budget is mainly aimed at their marketing, their glossy marketing, and maybe the unfortunate people pay to make their clothes are, you know, in a far-off country where we don't think about them, and you know that's something I'm particularly interested in too. But for young people, marketing themselves is vital. You know.
Well, when we talk about young people marketing themselves, we're talking about Instagram, are we not?
Yes, but that's not what I know much about, to be honest. I'm not really a big Instagram follower, but that's so immediate, and everybody can Instagram themselves. It doesn't mean they all become popular or effective or important, does it? You know, anyone can sit in their bedroom and Instagram their feelings and their thoughts, but someone like Charles, he's going out, he's doing his club nights, he's been doing that since he was a student, and he's building a reputation and a following, which then feeds into his shows and must help him in the creation of his design ethos. I mean, it's actually great when you're working with a team of people to design. You know, it becomes more than the sum of the parts. At least I always found that.
And I think it also helps to identify his market and who he's trying to sell to.
Absolutely.
You know, that's the thing that's really important about it as well.
Are those people who are interacting with him on Instagram or on Tumblr or wherever actually people who are buying the clothes? Or who is buying the clothes? Because I know they're sold at DSM. I'm not sure where else they're sold, but.
So they're sold in New York, they're sold in Japan, they're sold here, I think they're sold in Korea, they're sold at quite a few sort of places as well. And I think I suppose it's an aspirational lifestyle almost, or an aspirational group of these people who are going out and talking about like non-binary, talking about new gender identities. And there's a lot of people all over the world who are sort of thinking about this and want to identify with that. So I think that's definitely who he's aiming at. He can correct me, of course, at some other point. But I sort of think
are they buying the clothes, though? Are these kids really buying the clothes?
Yeah.
The ones who go to Loverboy, are they buying the clothes?
Yeah.
Well, I don't think it matters if they're not buying many clothes, because maybe some of the audience can be making their own clothes.
Right.
You know,
well, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Which I think, to have that sort of profile, it moves you further in the world of commerce. So exactly. In LA and New York, in Japan, you know, there will be people who can afford to take 2 or 3 pieces for their small shop. You know, and that's how you have to start. You know, any young designer is going to start that way. Otherwise, you're going to go work for a big company. And I think it's very brave and admirable. And it's sort of thing that's really difficult nowadays because everything is so expensive. You know, young people can't open their own small shop because rents are astronomical.
Yeah.
Even if you go to Shanghai and you say, where are the young designers? No, they go, can't afford to sell here. You know, and so there's 1 or 2 little shops. But, you know, if people can have their evenings and they can then sell direct to the public and their fans, they can make a larger fan base.
I mean, this often comes up in discussion of like designers who are creating a world around this idea of DIY culture. And obviously, Charles is very influenced by Westwood and by that movement and that kind of heyday of make it yourself clothing, which to me was an incredibly empowering time because it taught people that they didn't have to have gone to CSM or wherever to design clothes and adorn their body. Is it having the same effect today?
Well,
And that's I guess that's what I'm skeptical about. Are people inspired enough by this to start making their own clothes?
I'm not sure if that would matter much to Charles, whether they're inspired enough to make their own clothes. We're talking about him selling his clothes, but I think his near and dearest, yes, they will be, and they should be, and he can be inspired by that. But if you think of the early days of punk, you know, I think one of the first Sex Pistols performances was actually at Andrew Logan's party, and everybody, every time there was a show for the Sex Pistols, they would be promoted all around, and lots of people who were invited, who were in the fashion world, would be invited. And you know, that was a great way of getting a very different aesthetic in the public view. And then after that, the records became infamous, and it became what known, you know, Europe and then worldwide. But it did start off with a ground roots thing, even punk.
Is this a different aesthetic? Picking up on that point about a different aesthetic.
The world's so different today. I mean, the thing I think was when I saw punk first, I really thought to myself, oh my God, this is the first time I've ever seen people purposely ripping their clothes out.
Exactly,
You know,
yeah.
up till 76 or whatever, it was like the idea was the bourgeois elegance, you know, was the sort of acme of perfection. And then suddenly, oh my God, they're ripping their clothes out. But then I discovered what's it called, the macaronis in the 19th century who purposely ripped their clothes out too. So hey, nothing's new. But it was everything. If you go back to the 1970s, things were so different, so staid, you know, so conservative in a way, that punk was a huge revolution. These things are sort of more available now. So it's
I think that statement still happens because, as you were talking about small designers and small shops, there's not that availability. You can't do it as a small designer, you don't have the money to be able to invest in something like that. So something like starting a club night or something like that is the answer instead of going to a gig or
Well, I remember
like that.
he used to bill Loverboy as like a way of paying for his MA.
Yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
which he did at my club. So, you know, I saw that once a month, you know, and I mean, and the thing is that there was a whole community that were involved in it. And so like people from art school and Matty Boven and all those people were all involved in all of that sort of stuff. So I think it's just another way of finding a community.
It's a collective.
It's collective.
A creative
exactly.
collective community, which
Yeah.
has happened with the punk movement, with the new romantic movement, with if you go through the thread of clubs from starting with punk,
yes.
You can find a real strong feeling of creating communities, and like, you know, even with your night, Boombox, you know, that was another safe place to go and get dressed up and have fun and meet new people, or meet people
be
you sort of
inspired.
knew, and be inspired, you know, and it was new things always come out of those meetings, whether they're in a club space, but also with online communication as well. Things can happen there as well, you know, and you make friends that you never met in real life, and then you plan to go somewhere and meet them.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, when you're
it's
talking
just-
about who connects with it and who's buying it, I think that's the thing. It is global, and there are all these people messaging each other as well. You know, and I mean, you know, London is a place of style and fashion that people all over the world venerate and follow. So, you know, that's what happens. So, and then there are people who want to be a part of that, or imagine that they can be part of it, and have some identity with that community as well. That's really important.
I think I wanted to pick up on that online communication aspect of it. I remember there was like a video interview of Tim Blanks with John Galliano, and he started talking about how Galliano's muses had now become Instagram babes, which to me was a really sad moment to watch, because he just sounded so ridiculous. A lot of fashion to me these days seems to be driven by that square image, and I want to know how we think that, I don't know, how Instagram and social media is a positive, but also whether it is kind of dulling things down a bit, creating things that only exist in that small box.
I think it's really making things a lot more throwaway and a lot more transient, and I think the sort of Instagram culture has just diluted fashion imagery, I think.
I mean, I think it can be a starting point for inspiration, because there's some things that you would never know yourself, no matter how much research you did. So for some people, it can be a starting point and inspiration for other stuff. But unfortunately, I kind of do agree that, you know, there's a lot of throwaway ideas and fashion and images that happens because of Instagram. But there will be a few people who will latch on to something and then research it hopefully further, and then you know, that becomes inspiration for them. But not all the time. And you have to find that inspiration and latch onto it for it to happen, and for you to journey further and find
I'm sorry, I really enjoy the social media platform. I find it really exciting, and I love seeing what people post, whether they're posting just sort of selfies at a party or mood board inspired type imagery. I actually find it really interesting and inspiring, and so I don't think it makes things throwaway particularly, because it makes things more accessible and starts a conversation, an interesting conversation. So I'm excited by it.
But do you not think we're just constantly bombarded with imagery that actually on a daily basis, there's so much being thrown at you that actually doesn't really stay in. Whereas if you go to a bookstore, a library, and you're researching, what you're looking at actually is going to stay with you for much longer.
You have to put a perspective on it and not forget that the beauty of something in real life is there to be had as well. Obviously, you have to find a balance.
I guess I'm just talking about this from a fashion perspective, and I think, especially with fashion imagery, I really feel like, the rise of social media and the internet, I think has really almost cheapened fashion imagery.
I think that certainly for deep research into fashion inspiration, definitely nightmare when students just go and look at any old thing on the internet, or even facts, and then they read incorrect facts, and that exhausts me. And I think back to the days when you had to go to the library was so much more rich, but as a tool for communication.
Absolutely. But I think when you're now getting shoots and campaigns commissioned just because of the power of Instagram, or how many followers this person has, or actually the whole concept of like a shoot or a campaign is targeted at getting the most hits, I think it actually it compromises the artistry.
Isn't it? Because
it's also a business thing, isn't it?
Yes, it's a big business thing.
So it's about business.
But I don't think that relates to creative fashion at all.
No.
I mean, because that is more really middle market, high street, and you do see that level actually sort of pursuing its tail downwards, because actually what you see is more and more and more boring on commercial websites, and possibly that's because if that person chooses to show it on their Instagram and they can wear it, it's actually kind of already it's a lot less interesting than it was.
It's been diluted an awful lot just to be there, exactly.
But I don't really follow that sort of thing. So I'm not
into
Instagram, so I don't see that
sort of
stuff.
You look at.
And I guess the point I'm trying to bring in.
You're not on anything, are you?
No, I got rid of it all.
You what?
I got rid of it all.
I was looking for you.
He's a Luddite.
But to bring it back to Charles, I guess I just wanted to talk about, again, this idea of a creative director in terms of curation, and in terms of how somebody researches a collection. I would have to agree with Richard that it becomes very diluted, and your real proper research is not there. And I think that's why a lot of young designers can kind of get away with ripping off so many really obvious things these days. And I think we should start looking at Charles' clothes and discussing some of his influences. I have not seen the show, but some of us have been there already. Some of us have even contributed bags to the collection.
There's my lovely orange bag. I'm so happy with it.
So obviously very colourful. How did everyone respond who was there when the first looks came out?
Well, the atmosphere was quite amazing, wasn't it? It was quite empowering, quite uplifting. There was a bit of Star Wars, a bit of Bronski beat. It was kind of like soaring and kind of beautiful, and you kind of launched into the show with these strange figures dancing around, and then out comes somebody sort of covered in squiggles and marks, and out they sort of come with their bare ass cheeks showing. You know, I mean, what's not to like?
Julia?
The show started with a presentation which Charles, it's a theme that he sort of carried on from his last show. Of these dancers, and I, going back in time, I felt they had a sense of a performance troupe of the late 70s, the neo-naturists.
Yes.
So there was a primal element in there, and it was really fun because they were all pink. Anyway, so there was a sense of joy going on.
Body mapping,
and
things
from
like that,
the midst
you know.
of these dancers, performance artists, came the fashion parade, which was amusing, fantastic, enlightening, and I really like the way Charles puts a mishmash of shapes together and colour and things that might not, you know, he's still trying to sort of break some rules in there, which is quite hard to break.
What rules is he trying to break?
Well, it's just sort of like with the painted face. I mean, I know they're all the trimmings. Obviously, you don't, you know, if you were going to buy Charles's clothes, you have the option of doing the full look, shall we say. But those things, they're the things that sort of pull the whole look together. Just putting together, you know, just changing things slightly with trouser lengths and things, and maybe, you know, I mean, I could sit here and go, oh yeah, I've seen it all before, and in a sense I have seen a lot of these things, but I've not seen it put together in this particular way, shall we say, and that's really exciting, and I'm really excited by fashion. And also, can I add another thing, that Charles's clothes are really well made and crafted, and I think that's very important to add, because I think sometimes when things look a bit sort of like DIY, counterculture-y, that, you know,
it's not so impressive when you get them on the rails.
Bit sort of like uniform pieces anyway.
I think
but
that's
his tailoring is beyond.
I want to
beyond.
pull you up on that.
No, I know. I'm getting all passionate.
Don't stop her now.
I don't know if I agree. I remember from the last collection, most of the suiting seemed to me to be completely ill-fitting.
But did you see it, after the show?
I went into, I remember going into DSM actually.
Right.
I remember going into...
Not so fast.
Well, we've
But
got to
you
have
look
some
gorgeous.
balance. We've got to have some balance.
Yeah, but the thing is, Finn, you look gorgeous in one of these looks. I can see you.
I'd love to wear some early 2000s Galliano instead of that, I'm afraid.
Well, yeah, you could do that.
Maybe a bit of both.
You know, there's a thread of all these influences coming into Charles's work, and that's how things move forward, you see.
No, that's what I want to talk about.
Yeah.
Does it help things move forward if we regurgitate those ideas?
Well, it does, because it's somebody else, like, looking at it and doing it. I mean, we could all draw an apple, and the way that we draw an apple is going to be completely different. So to say that you're copying it and doing it the same way is just not
also
so.
never
It's
the
really
same.
not so.
It's never the same.
Never,
You know,
ever. And it always moves it forward.
Because believe me, I've seen for over 20 years students, you know, renewing and refreshing ideas that I lived through, but it's never done the same.
Are you excited by those
yes,
things? Do you
yes.
still get inspired
Absolutely.
by it?
Absolutely.
Glad
I mean,
to
I
hear
think
you're
that
not
you're
jaded.
talking about, no, I'm a very optimistic
Good,
person.
I love it.
We want her at dinner parties soon.
But the whole,
I'm not invited.
the pink people coming out at the beginning, there's a sort of charming innocence about that, I
it's
think.
really,
You know,
honestly,
they
it's
were,
lovely.
because I didn't see the show, but when you were talking about the naturists, I was imagining something much more dark. But they were actually sort of happy and friendly, whereas the last show was very dark. And I think there's more appropriation in the show, there's more mixing and matching, there's less sort of baroqueness. But I think that maybe that is a marketing ploy, because these are looks you can wear. You know, that not much of this is actually, I couldn't wear that, you know, on a night out. It's really approachable.
But I'm immediately again seeing, so you've got these newspaper print t-shirt covers, which is immediately says Galliano, it says Gautier.
But that's
But
ancient
that's been going on
history.
forever and ever and ever, those sorts of trends.
That's ancient history
Exactly.
to young people.
And that's the problem. I
No,
agree.
it's
It's
not
taken
problem.
to young
The reason
people, that's
that
the
they
problem.
can renew it. I mean, of course you'd rather have a Galliano early 2000. It was made by Dior and be impeccable.
Yes.
Of course you would. It would be a piece of art. But, and maybe this as a young designer isn't made to that standard, but that hardly matters. I mean, if all my students, every time I saw them go with something, nope, done already. You never get
I'd love
anybody
you to
doing
do that.
anything.
Yeah.
You have to say, do you realise that was done this time, this time, this time, this time? But they've got to then look at
No, I
that
agree.
and then make it afresh.
Yeah,
So
own
is
it.
this making it afresh? That's the question.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But I think you know, Charles is one of those designers who is openly, massively influenced by pop culture, and that's you can see it, and it's ingrained into his visual aesthetic. And you know, when somebody is so consumed by pop culture, of course those references are going to come through in the collections. Everybody has to start somewhere. Everybody has this sort of subconscious reference point. And I don't think that he goes out to intentionally copy anybody. I think it's just sort of inherently in him that, you know, he's grown up looking at all these clothes, being inspired by all
Yeah.
these designers. And actually just when he sits down and sets to work, this is what comes
But
out.
also, you know, working with Jack, the stylist he works with as well, you know, Jack's mum owned a fashion shop, and, you know, she bought Body Map and Galliano and John Flynn, all of them before anybody knew who there was. So he's got this in wardrobes at his mum's place. So, you know, every now and again you'll see Jack in an original Body Map piece, you know, because obviously he wore them once and they fell apart. But you know, his mum still has all of that. So Jack has a connection with all of this sort of stuff as the stylist as well. So, you know, there's also those sorts of influences that kind of come through as well. And obviously he's like a young man of 22, 23. So the way that he wears Body Map now compared to when it was back then, it's completely different as well. And a really new, different angle on it all as well. And because the politics are different, the way he sees himself as a young, non-binary gay man is completely different as well. So the spin is new.
Well, people were non-binary and gay then.
Absolutely, but you know,
Gayer even.
but you know, owning it in this new way is something that is new, you know, and that is new. I mean, obviously, there's been gay people around forever, and queer people away, and non-binary, and
Unfortunately.
you know, that's
And as a
tremendous.
student, you know, I saw his work develop and change
Yeah.
over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, about 6 years.
Yeah.
You know, so you saw his aesthetic progressing because he's a Scot, you know, and
Like
when he
myself,
came,
actually. You
and
wouldn't
like
tell
me,
from my accent.
and like me, but I was born in Edinburgh. Anyway, the thing is that he started off with a sort of like Scotsman on mescaline kind of look, and then it kind of developed when he was in the MA. It became much more tailored, more constructed, and he's obviously being influenced and taking from what he sees all the time. And maybe nowadays with the Instagram, you know, generation, it is more of a mashup because there's so much influence coming in. You know, this is very, very mixed compared to the show before. There's a lot more going on.
People aren't armed. I feel like people aren't armed in the same way because of Instagram to spot the references, because they are used to seeing such a kind of overwhelming array of images that are kind of mishmashed together in a way for them.
But every designer, no matter where you go, whether it's Galliano or Westwood or whatever, they all had influences as well. So, you know, I mean, there wouldn't be many people that would have known, you know, maybe that Lee Barry was doing a lot based on an African tribe because he found some sort of dusty old book at the back of the library.
That's what he did, exactly. The dusty old book at the back of the library.
You know, but
and
that's the
what
whole
people aren't looking for anymore.
Yeah, I mean, there is that, but I mean, not everybody got those references anyway back then and would have seen that somebody had already done this look or that had done a fetish look that then Lee went and copied and wore out as well. So, you know, it's a select few of people, as I said before. It's about how you create and sort of look at Instagram and what you do want to look at, what you don't want to look at. And it's always been the same. You know, people either want to investigate and get excited by what they see and then find some deeper sort of level of meaning and also where that has come from as far as cultural references, or they don't. So, I mean, Instagram's just in a long line of all of that, magazines in the 90s, you know.
But are we reading too much into this? I mean, I kind of just think, you know,
My fault.
I just think who cares? Who cares like what the references are? Who cares where they come from? I think for me, you look at it and you think, does it feel relevant? Is it current? And actually, yeah, it is.
There we go. Is this true? Yeah.
Yeah.
You
I
stump.
mean, everyone's stressing about, you know, the multifariousness of Instagram and people having no brain anymore and no depth to go and research. But don't you think the pendulum or the swing of either fashion or politics is going to at some point go so far one way that people are going to reject that sort of research? People who think that they are really wanting to be new will start going to look for the dusty book at the back of the library.
I think it's all about finding a balance, to be fair. And, you know, social media is just a tool, and it opens up lines of communication that weren't there before. And the dusty book at the back of the cupboard, that's relevant too, as well, for another sort of like a journey into research. So, you know.
But going back to especially to the Instagram thing, I think my big issue with it is when it starts affecting people's work, where they start creating work specifically to get Insta likes or to become Insta famous. That's probably my big concern with it. I completely agree with you. It's a really useful tool. It's great for you know, keeping in touch with people, networking, all of that. I just think sometimes it can have a negative effect on creative industries because people specifically target their work to be more accessible.
Who are these people?
Me.
Most of the big fashion brands, you know.
The big brands, but the young designers?
Well, for example, though, in a show like this, I mean, Charles has always been very keen on set design and creating structures and things like that. We were talking a bit earlier about how some designers might use props or gimmicks in their shows in order to create some more hubbub around the collection.
An Insta moment.
An Insta moment, there you go, exactly. There's a lot of people who are doing that kind of thing, trying to be outrageous just for those clickable moments. And actually when you go into shops and you start putting your hands on the clothes and feeling the fabrics, feeling how they're made, it's incredibly disappointing.
But I think that's always been kind of one of those sorts of things that has happened in fashion. I mean, you know, Westwood, God bless that fabulous label, you know, you'd wear that stuff once and it would fall apart, but you were in love with that sort of stuff.
True.
That's not true.
That's not true at all.
The stuff that I bought just fell apart after one wash.
Oh my God.
But you were still in love. But the thing is that it didn't stop me from going in and buying it. You know, I still went and did buy it because you're in love with the whole idea about what that label's about. So you want to be part of it.
I just remember having a very upsetting experience when I went into Dover Street Market and I went to touch the kind of Aran knits that Charles did with duct tape. And the duct tape was literally peeling off the garment. And I thought, what a shame. It was just very upsetting. And then you look at the price tag and they're trying to sell these things for like 500-600 quid. And I just thought, this is nuts, it's bonkers. And there's a lot actually in DSM right now. Things like Balenciaga, even Gucci, where the clothes are just not well made anymore. And it's all about creating it's all about creating those installations in the store that are incredibly colourful and bright and say, buy me. And then you go up and you just, I am upset about the fabrics, about the way they're made.
Well, I think for some of the bigger companies, you're probably right that there isn't so much care taken with the interior of the garments, and they're probably made in similar factories in China to cheap companies.
Yeah.
But in the case of someone like Charles Jeffrey in Dover Street Market, if the garment features duct tape and falls out, go and get your own duct tape and repair it.
Well, I'd encourage them.
But
not so after spending 600 quid at Dover Street Market.
The person who spends 600 quid is only going to wear that outfit once. They're going to wear it once. They're only wear it once.
Say something. You're sitting there in your destroyed T-shirt, right? Rehash, but those original T-shirts.
This is original.
Yeah, those original the muslin ones.
The muslin
ones. They went on their own sort of deteriorating type of journey.
Yeah.
That was interesting.
Yeah.
So I think actually the duct tape on the Charles Jeffrey jumper is a direct ascendant of that idea that somebody has put something together that shouldn't necessarily be sold as an item because you know he sat in his studio or I'll put a bit of duct tape on that would be fun. And Westwood, they used to put, you know, the old days of seditionaries or whatever, they were just like stapling things together with safety pins. And they totally
and it wasn't cheap then.
It wasn't cheap at all. Because I used to save up my tips, actually. I used to save up to go and buy your stuff too. But it was like 2 weeks' wages. It wasn't cheap at all. So, I mean, you're lucky that pristine top has lasted those decades.
I have to admit it's a reproduction.
But you know, but that is part of the charm, the legacy of that idea. And I like that, you know, it turns those items, those clothing items, they are art objects. If you go around King James's house, he's got them all in, framed up. You know, they go on another kind of fantastical journey.
But to be sold as high fashion.
I think that's still valid. Sorry.
I kind of agree with Finn. It's like, you know, if you're going to pay top dollar, I think I kind of feel like you deserve quality.
Yes, but if the design features duct tape, I think you have to be a bit creative.
You have to understand what you're
You should spend time with that duct tape, working out more of an intricate way of playing with it than putting it on top.
But the people that were buying
being picky.
Don't buy the outfit then.
Buy another one.
But actually, you know, you can go to a top department store and buy an incredibly elegant swimwear. You know, that it says on the label, you know, don't go in the water, don't get with suntan oil on your hair, you know.
Well, I'm not saying this is specific.
So you are wearing something, a £500 swimming costume, which you're going to just wear once or twice and stand very still and not put any suntan cream on, and maybe take a picture of yourself nowadays.
But I don't want to charge just Charles with this. I think this is happening across the board. I mean, a pet peeve of mine is Balenciaga, of course, but if you go and touch the stuff that they're making right now, it's just ghastly. It's like $20 hoodies that they sell.
No,
the
really?
fabrics are just
how much?
Is it?
I don't even want to go there with how much. But I think this is happening across the board.
But there are people who will just buy something for £500 and wear it once.
They've got the
and
money.
throw it away. They've got the money. So it's a completely different market. It's not like Julia saving up for 2 weeks for her tips from whatever.
Another thing, just a little thing to make one feel slightly better about, you know, if you've got you want to buy an upcoming designer, and you know they're in their early stages of development as going through the creative process, blah de blah, and it's almost like you're donating to a worthy cause. And also the markup in shops is astounding, isn't it? As we all know. But if you think of it, you're helping support those new designers coming through. So like, he probably only made about maybe 1 or 2 of those jumpers with the duct tape on, and somebody's got that jumper somewhere, and that, you know.
And they're going to hold on tight.
And they've donated. They've donated to the Charles Jeffrey Fashion Fund and helped him.
I didn't know it was a charity case.
Well, you know, we're all charity cases, aren't we? Let's face facts. But you know, in some way.
It's good that Julia is now.
Yeah, I'm always up for charity, and in some way helped fund Charles to be able to do another collection in the future. So, you know, there, I've said it.
I really think actually that, I mean, I've got some trousers from Charles, and I think they're incredibly well made and really well cut, and yeah, I really like wearing them. I didn't actually see the jumper in question, but
the infamous jumper.
From what I've seen of Charles's work and touched and tried on, I think it's actually always really well made.
It's astounding. It is really well made. A tailoring on it from Sybil Rouge. She does a lot of the tailoring. She's an expert, top of the range. Lady of the stitch, let's say.
Expert stitch.
She's a fabulous woman, super talented, and she does a lot of, you know, these pieces. They're really very well put together. You know Sybil Rouge.
I guess I just noticed that deconstruction in fashion has become a bit of an excuse for
laziness.
Laziness, exactly. And when deconstruction came about as a movement in fashion, it was actually incredibly technical. And I think that's lost when, again, going back to Instagram, you just see a kind of cut up blazer that's kind of stitched back together and mishmashed with something else. You actually missed the point of what a lot of these designers were doing when they were deconstructing the idea of a blazer, was to really interrogate why each stitch was there, not simply to cut something in half and put it back together again with some duct tape.
Sure. But I'm sure it will come back to that at some point. It's just not there now, and that's the whole thing. The designers follow these trains of thought, and and people will start investigating things like deconstruction all over again, and it will come back and be that kind of really beautiful, essential, amazing, esoteric sort of thing all over again, definitely. But just not at the moment.
But I don't think clothes on any level are as well made as they were, say, 30 years ago.
Exactly.
No clothes come up to that standard.
Yeah.
Really?
No, but if you go into
I've
shops
been
and you
sewing
look
for 30
inside,
years, it's still the same.
but when you sold items in, say, the 70s or early 80s, you had to maintain a certain level of standard, or that they wouldn't be accepted in the shops.
Right.
And people would bring them back. But now, I mean, I was astonished in the 90s to look at some amazing couture pieces that were actually overlocked together inside. I mean, they had many, many tiny seams, and it probably was to make something really fine, but I always thought, oh my God, I didn't realize you could do that at that level. And I think that things are made quicker. I mean, somebody was talking to me the other day about handbags. You know, in the say the 60s, you would buy a handbag by a top designer. It would have lots of little envelopes, places to put your comb or to put your wallet. Now, a £700 handbag, you'd be lucky if you get one zip pocket inside and possibly no proper lining. You know, things have changed. There isn't that quality in general. So maybe if at the young designer level, it's kind of fallen off the radar a bit, maybe that's understandable, and maybe people accept that. I mean, when you're talking about the original deconstructors, they were taking from a level of the construction to deconstruct.
Precisely.
And now, that doesn't seem to be applicable. And if the customer doesn't care, then you have to ask yourself, well, how long does that matter?
Would you allow me to start blaming St. Martin's for not educating people well enough?
No, because we do educate people well enough. If you go and look at the St. Martin's clothes, I
was at the BA show, actually.
Yeah, well,
I was not impressed.
Well, I'm sorry about that.
When
it was
are
a
you
very
impressed?
angry, provocative show, and it is what it was. You know, that was they always follow. I mean, I'm not there this year, but they follow what the students lead with each year. And I think that if you looked at those clothes backstage, you would have seen actually where it was applicable to make them perfectly. They were made, because actually they are very well crafted, and that is something we do insist on students.
But does this not come back to that whole thing that we started with? The difference between actually being a creative director and being a fashion designer.
Yes.
I think that's, that's sort of the elephant in the room here, isn't it? It's like,
I think that's why I wanted to start off, I suppose, with that is, I think at the moment people are quite comfortable accepting creative directors as fashion designers, and there's a bit of the craft element that's lost in that conversation.
But then I think equally at the same time, I think it's so hard to come up with interesting ideas that you can't really take anything away from somebody being a creative director, because actually...
Sorry, when you say that, how do you...
So for example,
a creative director,
for example, if a stylist were to go in and head up a house, and it's their vision, they're not necessarily a fashion designer, but they're the head of that brand.
Exactly.
And so when people often say that Charles Jeffrey, is he a creative director?
Yes.
Is he a fashion designer? Because it encompasses more than just hands-on physical making.
Well, at his level and his context, I think he'd have to be both, wouldn't he? I mean, you do get certain designers who work on their collection, and then in is brought a stylist from outside who will change things around a lot. And in my experience, I always found that difficult to understand, because if you work with a great stylist who could drag in the best shoes for you that maybe you haven't time to look for and things like that, that could be an asset to your show. But if you have someone who comes along and says, don't like that, and kind of recreates it, then you think, what was the designer doing in the first place?
I think it's not so much that. I think it's more about, the hands-on physical crafting of a garment, whereas some people as a creative director, don't actually have that technical skill.
Like McQueen being at Savile Row, or Yoji began in the atelier rather than at a fashion school. I think there's there are a lot of designers coming out right now which don't have that real passion for crafting a garment, and you end up with a lot of young emerging designers who pick up very, very quickly, and I don't think they are really able to carry on a brand because they don't get that technique.
But I mean, I think a good stylist or creative director learns to understand what a craftsman is about, and then learns from them to be able to see how that technique that they're learning or watching or seeing can then be adapted and moved forward. So, you know, I mean, I'm a maker myself, so the whole sort of thing is that I will work with somebody who makes shoes or gloves or, you know, whatever, and you learn techniques from them and you move forward. And I think that is definitely what Charles is doing. From the people that he has around him, he's learning more about it, because obviously if you have a limited palette of techniques and skills, there's only so much that you can create. And obviously as you grow as a label, you want to have more creativity and push things forward, and the only way you can do that is by working with like incredible craftsmen.
But I think you see that every season. I think every season you look at Charles's collection and it just gets better, for me, stronger and stronger.
Let's look back at the collection. I'm now seeing what looks like a Vivienne Westwood rocking horse shoe. And also the legging underneath the shoe.
Delightful call.
The legging underneath the shoe is something that people.
Every size and colour.
I like those
I can't tell you how many leggings with underneath the shoe at the St. Martin's BA show. It's the
ski pant
effect.
A ski pant.
There's, let's go back to looking at the show a bit. How
the shoes.
I mean, the colour to me reminds me of like Medium Kirchhoff or something like that. I mean, it's very in that world, is it not?
I think it's just very much in the world of what's going on in
I think
popular
it's just
culture for people
Charles.
under the age of 25. I mean, I've been working because of the club that I own. There's a lot of like young creatives coming through, and these kind of like dirty yellows, dirty pinks, dirty blues and turquoise. It's like My Little Pony that's been put in the mud.
That's Medium Kirchhoff all over.
Yes, but I mean, the thing is that now there's a lot of it, so he's reflecting what he sees.
Finn,
Yeah.
we could all sit there and go, yeah, that's medium, oh, that's blah, 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 that's blah, blah. Yeah, we get all the reference points. We can do that for 40 years worth of a library backlog. And same with music, same with lots of things, art. You know, get to, I've seen that, you know. So, but put together, it makes a whole new vibe.
I agree, and I think you're kind of missing the point with Charles, because I was wondering, who are these young designers who you see being successful and being in Men's Fashion Week in London, who are you talking about Charles? Is he one of the ones you think is not? But I mean, there are certain designers for whom the craftsmanship is the key. And I wouldn't say necessarily the craftsmanship is the key, it's the appropriation which is the key with Charles. And you're kind of missing the point. Think of someone like Grace Wells Bonner, you couldn't but say that craftsmanship is one of her key elements, and she does it beautifully. And she's also a successful student, also from St. Martin's and also from fashion design and marketing, interestingly enough, but completely different. And with a different aesthetic. But Charles doesn't have Grace's aesthetic, and Grace doesn't have Charles. They're different people, thank goodness.
But I haven't seen.
Who are these other designers?
No, I haven't seen what Wales Bonner does now so much before. I do feel that is a new take on dressing, particularly on dressing men.
Very fresh.
And I think it was very fresh at the time. It was not. People weren't saying this is very now, this is very current. People were saying this is new. I haven't seen this before.
Yes. How often do we ever see something that's absolutely new?
But you can still look at the Grace Wells Bonner shows, and you can still reference where her shapes and silhouettes were coming from. Totally caftans and whatnot.
Yeah.
You know, I mean,
no one.
70s, sort of like early 70s.
Well, it started off with almost kind of blaxploitation, and then there was kind of softer African work, and
and actually, I love sitting there going, I've seen that, but actually, then you've got to look at the whole thing and how it all collides together, and that's really, really exciting. And also, and I have to say, and I keep going back to it, that I do think that actually Charles does make very wonderful, technically well put together clothes, actually, and I think he's definitely, you can see in each collection that is really coming to the fore, that his clothes are well crafted, actually.
But it's also joyful and inventive.
Yeah.
And
it's
think
fun.
that
And actually wearing fashion and dressing up is fun.
Yeah.
And I think people forget that it's just,
It's
let's
also
just have a laugh. It's only clothes.
But also, if you go back to, say, the 50s or the 60s,
Yeah.
you would have a very constrained view of fashion. You know, here comes the new look, and then here comes Balenciaga, here comes the sack press. So it was like all change, everybody change,
And
everybody
then
did the same
here
thing.
comes
But,
punk, and here comes club
punk.
culture, and
Exactly.
we still, as Londoners
But it
and
gets
as Brits,
quicker and
have not
quicker.
gotten out of that rut of thinking that is the last crucial moment of London culture, of British culture, and we are stuck on repeat with that
Of
as
what?
our reference.
But I completely disagree,
No,
because you were just referencing Wales Bonner, and that's completely a million miles away from club culture. So I don't think you can sit there and say that that is actually our last cultural reference point,
Fashion
because
is more
clearly
democratic
it's not.
now,
Yeah.
it's more permissive. You know, there was a time when only very wealthy people could afford to wear fashion. Things have changed and changed and changed a lot, and of course we've all speeded up. So the influences will speed up too. That's my point, is having taught people for over 20 years, yes, of course I'd come and go, hey, look, I've done this. I've made this garment in plastic. You know, you think, yep, seen that before, twice.
Yeah.
That went round twice. So you go, okay, do you remember that? Have you looked at this? But what are you doing with it? And I think that's fair enough. I really
But
do.
it's when it's so, to me, a lot of it is direct copies. I think of like, I mean, for example, the newspaper prints on there. I mean, I've literally seen that exact T-shirt. The rocking horse shoes. I mean, the makeup is Galliano.
But all from some
that
time
makeup
ago.
is actually
How long ago is
Lee
the rocking horse
Bowery.
shoes?
Well, there you go.
Early
yeah,
80s.
indeed.
But there's an element of that in there. There's an element of that in there, that's all. And he's put a new twist on it. That's all.
Yeah.
I think it all comes together really well, and I
I
think it
love
really
it.
works, and I think it's
I love it,
joyous
it's
and
fun.
a real tonic to have on the schedule, really.
Yeah. I think it's fun.
It's part of what London's about, and it's part of
Yeah.
what made London Collections of Men so successful in such a short time. It's diverse. And it really doesn't worry me if people are doing a Vivienne Westwood rocking horse boot. When did she do it? How long ago is that?
That's a good while ago.
Yep, it's going to be 30 years.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that in terms of fashion is perfectly acceptable to, you know, drag it out of the cupboard again. I mean, perhaps if you're an expert in fashion history, it annoys you because you want things to always be original. But I think that possibly you're just expecting too much, and the younger people will relate to that. They may be aware that that boot was around before, but they want to wear that high boot, or they admire
I'd
that
like
high
to
boot,
wear that
and
high
that's
boot
fun.
myself, actually. Yeah.
I would fall off it now.
I mean,
so
I guess it's because the platform was the cork,
Yeah.
so I guess it looks like a sort of, some sort of natural thing, and then I guess there's I never even thought it looked like a rocking horse shoe. There's a big old clump. Big old
But
corky
even
clump.
that, she
But,
took
yeah,
that from
but I
traditional
love that.
Japanese wear.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, exactly, but that's
So,
more of
you
an
know-
interesting reference than a fashion designer that was designing. I mean, 20 or 30 years in the history of dress is not actually that long.
It's
But
long enough
it's
for
long
young
enough for this,
people.
but yeah, exactly, for this generation. They've got absolutely
Don't know how
no
old you
memory.
are, but it's...
They weren't there.
Yeah. Well, talking a bit more about having fun,
Yeah.
should we talk a bit more about London club culture and about the party that surrounds Charles Jeffrey's collection, and about exactly that aspect of having fun with dressing up and going out and enjoying oneself? I mean, how does that inform the brand?
I think it's a clever way to make yourself into a brand, because after all, what is the point of wearing fabulous clothes if you aren't going out and being seen, dancing with your friends, showing off? That's always been an important part of a lot of fashion, not all fashion. Some of it's very much about day wear or cool, calm exterior, something very kind of minimal. But a lot of fashion is to do with, you know, is to getting dressed up and putting it out there. And I think, thank God people do that. I mean, I love to do that in my 20s. And you know, there was less places then you could do it, and you had to make your own. But then he's made his own. I mean, this kind of reminds me of Kinky Galinky, you know, in that it's that dressing up, being a girl, and just showing yourself off, which was, you know, a real wonderful place to go in the 80s and the early 90s. And you know, so I kind of see those references, and I think nowadays young people do want to go out and enjoy themselves, of course.
Yeah, and people love getting dressed up. There's still that sort of great energy.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm doing that Sink the Pink tonight, and everyone, but everyone that goes, you know, it's at the Troxy, the big ball.
Yeah.
You've been to it, right? But
I
people
actually haven't.
Oh, you should come. Do you want to come tonight?
Oh.
I'll take
Don't
you
tell
down.
I'm
It's so much fun.
Yeah,
It's so much fun. And everyone that goes is part of the story. The people that go are all dressed up as well. They really look forward to it. And I think there's still that element in club culture.
Are they doing new looks? This is another thing that I worry about London club culture, is I haven't seen really shocking new looks out there.
So what would be shocking?
I want to be told what's shocking, but I haven't been shocked yet.
I mean, as a person that loves to sort of have fun with dressing up and things, as you do yourself.
Yes, I do.
I think, when you get dressed up, do you sort of go out and think, I'm going to be really shocking?
No, I guess I gravitate towards
really
that, what I
go out
like.
and think they really want to be shocking.
No.
They just want to sort of like
Go out and have fun.
show a degree of flamboyance in a safe space, and like, hallelujah, these places exist and
compared to
are
many
thriving,
places.
thriving, especially in these austere times that we're in as well. In fact, you know, everything, fashion and art and everything, it always reflects the society at any given time, and usually in times of austerity, that's when it all goes bonkers.
London
even
is a
more.
safe place. London is a safe place for many people, believe me. You know,
People from
go
all over
to
the world come here just for
downtown
this.
Beijing, you can't walk around in this style, you know, whereas in London you can more or less walk.
I'd give it a good go.
And the students
You
come
do
to
give it
St
a
Martin's.
good go. You do give it a good go.
You know, the students coming to somewhere like St Martin's just say, you know, I'm at home now, you know, I can express myself as I want, because, you know, we're very privileged in London that, you know, we
But
can
again,
be
I see
aesthetically
when I go
aspired.
out, which is very rare these days.
Oh,
I do go out. I used to go out a lot more, but when I do
know.
go out, I see a lot of rehashed Lee Barrow looks, and it makes me upset that things aren't
But not
moving
all of them
forward.
are, some of them are, but not everybody's like that. And it's also, you know, Lee was also about the personality behind that look as well.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's the whole thing. It's always about the personality and the look together that sounds it, and that's what people are really after as well. So you might see somebody in a Lee Barry-esque look, but I'm sure the energy that that person is giving off and who they are is completely different. So in fact, the way that they're wearing it becomes completely different as well, and what they're doing with that look or how they're shopping is completely different as well.
But also, I kind of feel like if somebody is so inspired by somebody or somebody's outfit, what's wrong with paying homage to them? You know,
No, I think the issue is that I've seen clubs full of that look. And it makes me like, have we got
I know you're not going out.
All those Lee Barrys, they could
it just makes me, it feels like we're stuck in that loop of those club looks. And I think London needs something completely new, and I haven't seen
I wonder
it.
what
It
that could
frustrates
be.
me.
But I think
Finn, you've got to take
Finn
charge. You've got to take charge. I think it could be you.
I understand where you're
know what
coming
I
from,
mean,
because
though?
sometimes I walk into a club and I'm like, another painted face.
Exactly.
And you're just a bit like,
Jaded. Fucking hell. Oh, sorry.
But there's the energy that those people bring with these looks. That's the thing that's exciting and makes these clubs exciting. And these kids always do something slightly different. The technology that was around 20 years ago, the fabrics, everything's different. So it's naturally going to be different as well. And their energy is the thing that's really amazing with these looks, really.
I think I have an image of the Galliano makeup image that I have. Look, I was ready to go with this. It's identical. This is not stuff that's being reinterpreted. It, to me, is stuff that is just simply exactly the same.
But
cut and
Galliano's had a
pasted.
very long
I mean,
career.
that yellow and that blue
But he's had a very
and that
long
round
career, so
across
he's
the
going to go through every look anyway at some point, isn't he?
That's
He's been around for
identical.
30 years. And he's been doing what, 4 or 5 shows a year? How many shows is that? That's like 150 shows. Of course he's going to start referencing everything else that everybody else has done.
But that's identical.
It's not identical. There ain't no glitter on the ones that Charles has been doing. But if
the
you want to go up
same
and put some
makeup.
glitter on, it's up to you to do that.
That's the same makeup. Am I
But then
crazy?
it's the same.
Well, it's not the same
It's
makeup.
not the same.
Anyway, who cares even if it is?
It's a new
It's
interpretation,
thing.
and that makeup is done, by that most, wonderful makeup artist in the universe.
Exactly.
Whereas,
With Pat or somebody,
Charles's is
exactly.
much more like
I thought
homemade, and I
yeah,
think
but we
that's
started
acceptable.
talking about. I think we started
Who does
talking
who
about
does the
how
makeup? Who did the makeup?
Charles was.
No, there's a credit sheet somewhere.
Yeah, well, we were
I think
talking
it's
about how
Lucy
Charles
Bridge.
was
Oh, yeah, I think
collaborating.
Oh, she's
Lucy.
good.
It's Lucy Bridge is great.
She's fantastic.
Yeah, it'll be Lucy.
Yeah, it's new energy.
Yeah.
New energy.
And that's what London needs at the moment, is a lot of new energy.
Come on, Finn.
That's what it's all
We're
about,
going
isn't it?
out.
That's what the
I'll
change
get
in
my
London's
makeup
about.
bag out and I'm going to plaster you in makeup. Get the old wigs out. Come on.
The lashes.
Yeah.
And I think on
And
that
you're a
note,
really fun guy as well. You're
I
good
know, I
fun to
don't
go
come
out
across
with.
that way, do I?
No, you're really fun to go out with.
Sour,
think-
sat on
I
the
think-
end, sour. Sourpuss.
I think on that note, we'll all go and get dressed up, shall we?
Yeah,
Even more than this.
I am.
There we
I
go.
really like the hair in this show, I must say. Some of those
Wig and a wig.
piled on wigs. Yeah, I love that look.
Gorgeous.
Yeah.
All right.
Plonk
Thank
on.
you very much for
Yeah.
all your contributions.
Thank
and
you.
we're off to go to where are we going to sing the Pink?
Yeah,
Take
come
us
on.
somewhere.